So it seems like you've got no friends available to help you shoot that great idea that you had, but instead of calling the whole thing off, you've decided to just do it yourself. You're gonna be the director, you're gonna be the talent, you're gonna be the producer, and of course you're gonna be the person who gets the coffee. But filming yourself is a lot harder than you might think when you're wearing all of those hats, keeping track of all the little details and ideas that maybe come second nature to you normally is a lot more difficult. So in this video, I'm gonna give you a handful of tips and things to think about to make your self-filming experience and the final result a whole lot better. And just between me and you, after I reviewed this list, it turns out it's basically just good advice for anyone filming almost anything. So stick around because there's probably something in here for you, even if you do have friends available. I have friends. Now, the first couple of tips are a bit more conceptual, but the later ones are gonna show you what you can actually do with all this thinking that I'm gonna make you do. Sorry. So let's kick things off with probably the most basic one: know what you're shooting. And I know that sounds like a dumb thing to say, of course you should know what you're shooting, but this is going to be even more vital when you're self-filming because your brain is going to be busy with all those extra roles that you're taking on. This part of the process is going to look different for every project and for every person. For me, a lot of the time it's super simple, like I want to show me showing up at a spot, hiking up to the top of a mountain, and taking in the beautiful view. And that's really all I need to get me started on that kind of a project. But for other projects or for other people who maybe their brain just works a little bit different, that might mean scripts, might mean shot lists, or maybe even just a basic checklist of the important things that you want to make sure you shoot. So whatever that is for you and for your project, make sure you've got a solid foundation because it's going to inform all the other decisions that you make as a director, DP, talent, everything. The next tip is a two-parter. It's to understand your limitations and then accept them. Limitations have the ability to stop us in our tracks or to excite our creativity. And when you're shooting alone, you're about as limited as you can be. There's only one person to carry all the gear that you're gonna need. It's really hard to get any kind of movement in your shots while you're in frame. Most of the time, there's no one standing behind the camera to make sure that you stayed in focus or that the audio is working okay. And then of course, as they say, our most valuable resource, time. Filming by yourself takes a lot longer, so those time limitations become very apparent very quickly. Every single time that you have to run back and forth to the camera, you're ticking down that clock between losing the light or just getting so tired that you really can't keep going. So be ready for that if you can. And then the most important part of this tip is that you accept those limitations. You don't let them get you down, you let them spark your creativity. All right, stepping away from the conceptual stuff for a second, the next tip is to bring the right gear for the job. And combining what we've already learned, knowing what you're shooting and understanding your limitations, that should inform what we're going to bring with us. Personally, for these little hikes that I like to film, I'm trying to bring as little gear as possible to still get the job done. If I had friends available to help me, I could ask them to carry some of it. We could bring some more stuff, maybe some more kind of like just in case we need it kind of things. But when it's just me, I'm just trying to bring what I think I will absolutely need. Obviously, I'm not bringing any lighting with me, but that might be something that you want to consider depending on what kind of shoot you're doing. As far as lenses go, I generally start by trying to cover as wide a focal range as I possibly can. So I'll bring like a 16 to 35, 24 to 70, and 70 to 200. And again, this is going to be different depending on what kind of location you're in, what kind of shoot you're doing. If I need specific lenses to get specific shots, I'll make sure to bring them. And on top of that, this is of course limited by what you already have. So use the gear that you own. If you're filming outside in bright sunlight, you're probably gonna need ND filters. Maybe you want a polarizer depending on what you're shooting. Are you capturing audio? Do you need microphones, lav, wireless, any of those kinds of things? Hey, future Dunna here. I just realized that in this section, I forgot to say some pretty basic stuff. Tripod, memory cards, batteries. Those are things that you're gonna wanna make sure that you bring. Okay, back to the other stuff about gear. Other things to consider are monitoring. Does your camera have an app you can connect to monitor and set up your shots, maybe start and stop recording? Is the flip screen gonna be enough for you to be able to see, or do you need to bring a monitor with you? How important is camera movement to whatever you're shooting? Do you have a gimbal that you can set up on a tripod and pre-program movements into it? Or do you have a small motorized slider that maybe you can do the same thing with? And then of course, again, are you willing to haul all of this stuff wherever it is that you're going. If it's a shoot that's in one location and you can kind of just bring it, dump it all there, use it as you need it, then great. If it's like these hikes, you're not going to want to carry them the whole way. So again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but every shoot is a little bit different. I'm not going to try and tell you exactly what you need to bring because you're going to have to figure that out on your own. But knowing your gear and knowing what you're going to need is really key here. One thing that I almost always bring with me because it's so small and light, easy to pack away, and it comes in handy for these really unique shots is the DJI Action 2. And DJI is actually sponsoring this video. The Action 2 is by far my favorite action camera to date for its size, weight, quality, stabilization, and for its magnets. It allows me to do things that would be really difficult to do with my other cameras. For example, the magnet lanyard lets me get super simple point of view shots to make you feel like you're seeing things as I would be seeing them. I also like to use a bite mount because it's easy for me to move the camera with my head. The size of it and excellent stabilization makes it great for mounting to the car with a suction cup. The Action 2 is also waterproof up to 10 meters without the waterproof case and up to 60 meters with the case. And sometimes you just need to be able to sneak a camera in a tight situation and those big mirrorless and DSLR cameras won't go in there. The Action 2 software and touchscreen are intuitive and easy to use, and again, it just allows me to get shots that I might not be able to get otherwise. But that is just really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the Action 2, just some things that make sense in the context of what we're talking about today. There is so much more going on with this little camera, so if you want more information, there's a link down in the description. You can check it out there. Huge thank you to DJI for sponsoring this video. Okay, so we've got all the gear that we're gonna need. The next tip is to make sure that you're getting balanced coverage. And what I mean by that is that especially when you're filming by yourself, it's super easy to get caught up getting the same types of shots over and over and over again. You're already running back and forth to the camera a million times. There's going to be an inherent pull to get lazy and just shoot the same types of shots. Do not succumb to that feeling. Basically, you just want to get a nice balance of wide shots, mediums, and close-ups, and you want to make sure that you're balancing out shots of the main subject or yourself and the surroundings, or kind of B-roll, whatever you need to kind of show what's going on around the subject. So in my specific type of example, maybe there's a wide shot of me pulling up to the scene, then there's a medium shot of me walking by the camera to the back of my car, a detailed shot of me grabbing my camera bag, and then maybe we see where we are by me showing a sign or something like that, so you know, hey, we're at Mount Work and we're gonna go for a hike. Just enough variety of shots so it doesn't feel boring. The other thing that you can do in a similar vein is to get multiple shots of the same action. So if I'm stopping to take in a view, maybe a wide shot of me walking up to it, and then as I hit that view, a medium or close-up of me stopping to take a breath and look around. And then follow that directly up by the kind of point of view shot so you can see what it is that I'm looking at. All strung together nicely, this is gonna feel like it's all of these things happening at the same moment in time. It's actually only one thing, even though you had to move the camera a bunch to make it happen. The next tip absolutely changed the game for me when I started using it, and that is to use manual focus. I don't care how incredible you think your camera's autofocus is, if you're not at the camera, able to control it and tell it what to focus on, there's always a chance that it's gonna choose something you don't want it to focus on. And on top of that, I actually find it quite visually pleasing when the focus stays in one spot and the subject moves in and out of that focus. Or sometimes it's cool to just focus on something interesting in the foreground and just walk through the background so you can see that there's motion happening there. You know the subject is moving, but you're actually getting more information out of the scene from what's in the foreground. To use manual focus, I'll generally pick a point in my shot where I think it'll be most important to have me in focus, either at the point where I'm walking through or at the point where I want to land. I'll choose something that's approximately where I'll be standing at that point and focus on that. If there's nothing at that distance from the camera that I can use, I'll go put my backpack where I'm going to be standing and use that, focus on the backpack, and then I know when I hit that mark, I'm gonna be in focus. And so then as I walk through the scene, as I hit that point, I'll come into focus, and as I move past it, I'm going to be bokeh. The only real exceptions to this are anytime that I know my face is going to be clearly in the scene for the whole time, because then I can use my face detect autofocus, or if I'm talking to the camera like this, again, because my face is in the whole time and I trust my autofocus system to find me and stay with me. All of this in focus, out of focus, hocus pocus brings me to my next tip, which is to use your damn aperture. I know it can be super tempting to shoot everything wide open all the time, but stopping down your aperture can actually make your shots better for a couple of reasons. First of all, like we talked about before, nailing focus when you're on this side of the camera is already hard enough as it is, but you know what makes it easier? If more of the frame is already in focus. So slightly increasing depth of field by pushing your aperture up to something like f4 or f5.6 might save you a lot of headache for missed focus shots by just putting a little bit more of the frame in focus. And also, if you're trying to show off a beautiful scene and there are lots of things to look at in it, why not put a little bit more of it in focus for the audience to actually see? If you're shooting on a super wide focal length like 16mm, this might not be necessary. f2.8 at 16mm puts most of your scene in focus already, but it's just something that you actually want to be considering. Don't just default to the widest aperture possible. All right, so we're living on the edge here. We're using manual focus. We're actually using our aperture to our advantage. One thing that we're gonna wanna make sure we're doing in the next tip is to review your shots every single time if you can. Normally, if you're behind the camera, you might be able to get away with moving on from a shot right after you're done because you were there, you watched it go by the whole time, you pretty much have an idea whether it worked or not. But when you're filming yourself, do not move that camera until you have checked the shot to make sure that it worked. Make sure that you don't need to change settings or change focus or anything like that and shoot it again. This is one of those things that adds a lot of extra time to filming by yourself, but it's going to actually save you a ton of headache and time in the editing process. Because trying to fix something or patch it up or try and live without it if it's something important in your story, it's such a pain. That being said, there are certain things that you can get away with doing in post, and that's where our next tip comes in: fake camera movement. Sometimes a series of locked off tripod shots is just fine, but it can get a little bit boring. So what you can try and do is in post keyframe small movements so it gives the illusion of camera movement. For example, one of my favorites is to slightly zoom in as I'm walking away from the camera and slightly zoom out as I'm walking towards the camera. It almost gives the illusion that the camera is moving with me. And of course you can do the same thing for left to right movement or right to left movement, but I don't do those nearly as much. And remember that if you're gonna do those types of things, you're gonna need to zoom in first to give yourself room to move. So hopefully you planned ahead and shot those specific shots extra wide to give yourself that extra space. The other thing that you can do in post is fake camera shake to give it the illusion of being handheld. DaVinci Resolve has a plugin that makes this super easy, but there are ways to do it in all the other programs as well. If you do a quick YouTube search, there's lots of tutorials out there to teach you. That fake camera movement can give a more professional feel, and it definitely starts to hide the fact that you were alone when you shot the thing. And the final tip of this video is the one that I probably struggle with personally the most, and it's to remember to be creative with your shots. Like I said earlier, when you're wearing all of these different hats, when you've got all of these different roles, it can be super tempting to take the easy route and not get too experimental and creative with what you're doing. And while you should definitely be considering what the project needs first, it doesn't mean that you can get lazy just because you're filming by yourself. Remember, the audience doesn't necessarily know. They're not judging you based on the fact that you did film the whole thing by yourself. They're just judging whether they liked it or not. So that means that you need to go the extra mile to make sure they can't tell the difference between your film that you shot all by yourself and somebody else's where they had a proper crew and everybody to do their individual jobs. So those are my tips, but as always, I want to hear from you. Do you have any extra tips that you would give to someone who is trying to film themselves? Make sure to leave a comment down below, and on your way down there, hit that like and subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on future videos. Huge thank you to DJI for sponsoring this video. Make sure to go check out the link in the description to check out the Action 2. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.